What is going on with leaders today? I mean, we have access to more leadership advice than ever before. Yet, we don't seem to be getting any better at leading. If anything, we're getting worse. Maybe the real problem isn't so much about bad leaders making bad decisions. Maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe the real problem is how we define leadership itself. You see, long before leadership advice became a billion-dollar business, a group of Native Americans formed an alliance known as the Iroquois Confederacy. Now, for them, leadership meant stewardship. Leaders saw themselves as stewards of the land, of the people, and the resources. They saw it all as being interconnected. And when the people chose leaders, it wasn't based on charisma or personality. Leaders were chosen for two main reasons: their wisdom and their ability to see 7 generations ahead. In fact, before any major decision could be made, leaders were required to ask, how will this decision impact people 200 years from now? Think about that. Not next quarter or next election cycle, but 200 years. But you know what? It worked. So much so that years later, these same leadership ideas would inspire parts of our own US Constitution. But with the passing of time and the rise of the industrial age, the world was starting to change. People were migrating from farms and villages to cities and factories. And within just a few decades, millions of people had traded the natural rhythms of a rural life for a life dictated by time clocks, production lines, and rigid hierarchies. And as the world became more and more mechanized, so did our ideas about leadership. Now, today, of course, we live in the modern age, but our ideas about leadership, they're still stuck back in the 1800s. Here's what I mean. When I got into tech about 30 years ago, I had no idea that one day I would be leading a technology organization. It wasn't even on my radar. But when the opportunity presented itself, I made it my mission to study leadership like my career depended on it. Because, well, it did. I studied every leadership book I could get my hands on, studied frameworks, methodologies, models. I was really looking for an answer to 3 questions. How do you become a better leader? How do you build better teams? And how do you build a strong organization? And after years of researching and studying, it all came together one night while I was watching a documentary called The Serengeti Rules. It showed how life and nature and living systems work together to adapt and grow and thrive in various environments. And it was in that moment that it hit me. We have been sold a myth that says leadership centers around an individual, a parent, a teacher, an executive. It suggests that if we just focus on improving the leader, then everything else, our family, our community, our employees, will all somehow just improve right along with us. But this concept of leadership was born during a time when organizations were thought of as machines and people were viewed as parts. And a leader's job was to control that machine and keep it running. But the truth is, organizations are not machines, and people are not parts. In fact, if anything, organizations function more like living systems than they do machines. Now, I know at first that might sound a bit far-fetched, but when we take a deeper look, the parallels between the two, it's hard to ignore. For a living system or an organization to survive and thrive, they both must use their resources efficiently. They must adapt to changing environments, defend against threats, and maintain a delicate balance between sustainability and growth. The principles that govern their success are more than just similar, they are identical. So the question is this: how can we use these principles to solve our leadership problems? Well, first, we stop treating people like they're parts in a machine that need to be managed and controlled. Second, we start adopting a living systems mindset, a mindset that restores leadership back to its roots, back to stewardship. Now, if you want to see living systems leadership in action, all you need to do is just walk through a garden. You won't see the gardener pressuring the tomatoes to ripen faster, scolding the peppers for being behind schedule, or screaming at the weeds to stop growing. Because gardeners understand something that modern leaders seem to have forgotten. They don't make the plants grow. They create the conditions that make growth possible. That's why the best gardeners, they don't focus on themselves or the plants. They focus on the soil, the water, the nutrients, the light. They focus on the system because they know that when the system is healthy, growth, it takes care of itself. And here's the best part. When we adopt a living systems mindset, everything starts to grow stronger. Our leadership, our decision-making, and our relationships. And just like in a garden, it all starts with one thing: potential. Think of potential like your seeds. They're already planted in each and every one of us, just waiting for the right conditions so they can germinate and grow. Now, of course, seeds need soil, and that's where culture comes in. Culture acts as our soil. Not only does it provide a foundation for growth, but culture also determines what takes root and what doesn't. Now, next up, after culture, is communication. Communication is like your water. because when it's flowing, things are growing. But when communication dries up, the whole system will start to wither and die. Now, next up, after communication, come values. Your values work like nutrients because they make you stronger from the inside, helping you to weather those tough growing seasons that we all face. And last but not least is encouragement. Encouragement is like sunshine because when people feel valued and they feel supported, just like a plant, they will start to rise and stretch and grow towards that light. You see, our job as a leader is not to be a hero that makes success happen. Our job is to create an environment that makes success inevitable. Here's the truth. Thousands of years before the first leadership book was ever written, nature was already showing us how to lead. No titles, no job descriptions, no rigid hierarchies, just living systems, growing, adapting, and enduring. So, whether you're raising a family, leading a company, or coaching a team, remember, you are not running a machine. You are cultivating a living system. So instead of focusing on fixing people, let's focus on the conditions around them. Because the future of leadership, it doesn't belong to mechanics. It belongs to gardeners. Thank you.